Oh, and welcome back to the Life Without Limits podcast. We're here in the heart of the Latin Quarter in Paris.
That's right.
I'm here with Brett Hughes, repeat offender. Welcome back to the pod. Brett, we've done this before where we've talked, we've hung, been best buds for over 10 years now, but we haven't had an international podcast.
Yeah. This is, I think I was podcast maybe number 2 or 3. And that was from, I believe, your apartment or my car in Venice. And here, this is a little different.
I love it. So there's so much to unpack with you, but I want to focus on you live here now. Yeah. You decided to pack up your things and move your life to Paris. I think majority of us who have left our small towns or our big cities to see the globe, we have this feeling of, we want to go get lost somewhere. We want to go to New York. We want to go to Paris. We have this romantic thought and ideology around travel and what travel can be. We would agree that that's totally accurate.
Yeah.
But you did it. You did the thing that I think strike people with so much fear when it's, let me get way, way outside my comfort zone. So first, let's just start with, how is it in Paris?
I mean, it's amazing. It's all the things that we kind of knew it would be. And, for like a frame of reference for the podcast, we've been here and tomorrow will be a month. So most places and most relationships don't kind of open themselves up for a month. So coming as like a neophyte, but also so far it's everything we kind of hoped. And to your point earlier of we all want to do this. Well, it wasn't a solo experience. I'm here with my wife. So I think like the kind of, it isn't like the most on the heels of Memorial Day, right? It's not like the most fearless act of all, but there's certainly some stress involved, and I'm lucky to have a wife who has a similar sense of adventure. And by the way, for those of you guys listening, as you should, we're doing this in an awesome cafe Yogi found in Paris.
Yeah, no, this is perfect. I mean, you hear the beans in the back, you hear the music in the background, you hear some cars flying by. I think this is exactly what this podcast is about, right?
Right.
The whole pod, as you know, is seeking the answer of what does it mean to be human. And this whole season is talking to people who are seeking to be their best versions of themselves. So and we're going to end this podcast talking about like some legitimate, tangible steps for people that want to pick their life up and go to that place they dream of. But for you, as an idea with you and your wife, when did this begin and why did you hang on to it? Because a lot goes on in both of your lives that could easily keep you in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think that's the truth. And I don't know if we're unique in that. I imagine that anyone who has thought about doing this and didn't do it probably has just as many valid reasons as we do. My wife, who's been on the podcast before, there's no shortage of work for her to do in Los Angeles as a musician, actress, songwriter, artist. Myself, that's where our network is. We've spent 10 years. So where did this start? For me, it started back probably when I was really young, my sense of adventure, just trying to just go outside of my parents' purview. I grew up on a farm. Starts there where you're just like, what's beyond that tree? What's beyond that forest? What's deep in there? And then as I got older, I'll never forget the first time I got a passport. It was to go to the Bahamas. And it was, I got there and got the passport stamp and thought like, oh, this thing is really powerful. I can get to go see new places and eat new food and understand new cultures and ask new questions. And I've really realized over the years that my curiosity is in direct line with kind of my fearlessness. And our friend Ken Black actually helped me kind of suss that out a little bit of my curiosity kind of overwhelms that. And then so as my curiosity continued to grow through trips to Nicaragua and the things I've done down there to the first time right when my wife and I met, we came over here for a European tour of hers, and we both kind of looked at each other as we were driving through Germany and UK and Amsterdam and Paris in particular, and kind of looked at each other like, we have to do this. And we don't know how. And that was 8 years ago. So this is 8 years in the making. It was no easier now, maybe even harder than if we would have done it when we were a lot younger.
You said two words that I think would spike anybody's interest. You said curiosity and fear. For those of you that have not listened to episode number 2, this is on in this podcast. Brett was one of the top high school football players in Ohio, spurred football, went to University of Virginia, played lacrosse, multiple All-Americans, national championships, 10-year professional career. So you are an elite competitor. How did you deal with the fear? Because this is not like you're moving to London, right, where
Right.
they speak English. Or my first trip was Australia.
Right.
Pretty much Los Angeles, just way, way, way further out in the Pacific Ocean. So how did you deal with that? And is it real?
The which part?
The fear.
The fear is real. This isn't. It's not the hardest. It's not I'm not here sacrificing a ton. I'm doing this because I want to, but I think your curiosity has to kind of overcome this fear. And I think Tim Ferriss, and I've heard a lot of people talk about like fearless, fearless. Two different words. And that's it. It's by design, we didn't go to London. London would have potentially been, quote unquote, easier. At the end of the day, packing all your stuff into a storage unit and putting your kind of life in a box is a really powerful thing. But it certainly was not devoid of stress for my wife and I as we're trying to pack our life into. It reminds me of that scene in Eat, Pray, Love where she's like packing it. She's like, I can't believe my life fits in a box. And the guy goes, it's funny how many people don't come back for their whole life. And we've thought about that a lot. Like since we've been over here, how we're living with a lot less. There's a lot less clutter mentally and physically in our space. And it's just a unique thing to choose some places like Paris, which there's plenty of people here who speak English. It's not the hardest place in the world, but they don't necessarily want to. So we're always the ones working hard to try to acclimate, and that's what we wanted. We wanted to go to a place that wasn't English speaking because we wanted to completely have to kind of like dig ourselves into a ditch and then climb out day by day, meeting by meeting. And we've done a really good job so far. And Kate is a far better French speaker than I will ever be.
What's it like being, if this is accurate, because you've been to Paris a bunch of times, so that it's like a city of yours, Mm-hmm. But what's it like being uncomfortable? Because I think people are. I'd be curious about that.
Yeah.
Talking to someone who packed up their life and went to another place, and it wasn't just the best baguettes and croissants and coffees, like. Now it's life.
Yeah.
What is that like for you?
Well, it's interesting how many people beforehand, and they come from a place of just, caring and, most people say like, it's not going to be, the thing you thought it was going to be. It's not just going to be like it is on vacation. And to that, I say, absolutely. That's the reason we did this. Like we didn't have any, we're not delusional in the fact that when you go for a week, like you've been here for a few days, like you just go, you walk in the rain every day, you eat out every night, you do all those things. We're very accustomed to kind of really digging into the group, or the community here. So I think that for my wife and I, if I'm getting to the root of the question, is that our day-to-day here is completely trying not to upset the balance that the Parisians live in, and it's just New York City in a lot of ways, but it's really not in a lot more ways. You've seen it yourself in 1 or 2 days. There's a pace to it that's different. There is a way of kind of engaging in all of that, and I think it forces us to become a lot more humble. I speak a lot less over here because who am I going to talk to? My wife and I have probably even grown closer in a month, but I can't truly communicate with people, unless they're really eager to practice their English.
I've always felt this about traveling, that we often go to see a certain place, but what we end up seeing is ourselves in a different light.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for you, not knowing the language as fluently as a local, what has that been like for you in terms of the conversation with yourself amid the streets here in Paris?
Maybe you just got to what I was trying to get to before. And to back up, I don't speak the language next to zero. I know the rudiments of how to get things, but it's required. It's a lot more introspective than it is anywhere else. When I'm sitting at a cafe, the culture is such that you kind of take it in. There is that idea of it, but when I'm walking, when I've started to run a lot, and there isn't gyms per se here, so I'm not like lifting or doing a lot of the things I would do back home. I'm just running, and we went on a run yesterday. All of a sudden, 7 miles goes down, and you've seen 17 monuments, and pretty soon there's just this rhythm to Paris that is a lot less verbal than my typical rhythm in the United States. And I've found that really helpful because I've realized how much there is to like unpack in my life.
Wow. Okay, the rhythm is a lot less verbal. What's that process like? Because I always tell my friends that like when I go traveling, I have to be alone because I need to walk and just talk to myself and talk out, like unpack my life, like unpack the suitcase and get into a little box. So for you, I mean, because you do so much. You are, I mean, we talk about all the iconic thinkers, whether it's Gladwell or you could put Tim Ferriss in that box, like really powerful people. When you and I talk, I walk away listening and I'm like, whoa, Brett just blew my mind. Whether it's talking about the way you give, the way you work, not in any specific job, but the way that you live, the way you are with people, your graciousness, how well of a listener you are. So I wonder, like, where have you seen moments or pockets of growth for you over the last, handful of runs or handful of walks along these amazing monuments in the city?
Well, one thing that is leading up to it, the amount of like graciousness I've had to give myself and my wife. Not that either of us have done anything wrong, but the part that is for all of this, and we'll probably get into it at the end, is the moments leading up to this are stressful. Yeah. Like it's not. I don't want to make this sound like it's hard to do, but it isn't easy. And so when I got over here, maybe you're the one who told me, but I have a hard time receiving. And so getting over here and just receiving from myself, even saying like, you've been talking about this for 10 years. And one of the biggest reasons this was important to me was I hate being the guy that says something and says it and says it and says it. And this thing in my life is one of the biggest ones. I said I wanted to get a motorcycle license, got a motorcycle license, said I want to do this. But I've been saying this for, I don't know, half my life and hadn't done it. So the first thing I've unpacked is kind of saying, okay, I moved over here. It didn't change my life immediately, but I made good on a promise I made to myself. And that's that. And then that, we actually went through immigration yesterday, which is why I didn't get to see you at the tennis match, but there, we got our stamp saying we're official. And I put down 30,000 steps yesterday, walking around the city, taking care of stuff, doing whatever, running with you. And through those, that's a big thing that's really come up lately is, job's not done. The adventure is just starting, but giving myself a moment to just say, like, that's pretty cool. Way to go.
Yeah, my dad has told me many times that it's like buried into my brain. Son, man is made to move, and we move through things.
Yeah.
He's a walker. As you know, I'm a walker. You're a walker or a runner. We always like to move. I think athletes have to process that way just in our creative minds. And to your point of curiosity, of dealing with fear, whether I've walked like through in and out and into the depths of relationships, through jobs, through life, because of movement. You literally moved. You move every day within this city, 30,000 plus steps or so.
It's ridiculous.
Curious where you hope to land when you move. I don't want a specific job. You do a million things. But where does Brett, like, where does your soul, where's your mind's eye say, that's pseudo North Star over the next 5+ or even more months?
Well, I think that for me, one of the question I get asked a lot about this, maybe you and I have touched on it, is that all things in your life have to move at the same rate as we get to some age when we become quote unquote adults. That any way, especially your career, your career is the one that when people look at you and you're not, that's not the North Star, and it's not progressing at the fastest rate. People want to question that. How do you do that? You know, I get a lot of, what are you doing for, how do you do that? And I've spent the last 15 years of my life fashioning a life that allows me to be trusted from afar. I haven't, and that part hasn't necessarily been comfortable, but it's not something you can go from working at, you know, Amazon one day to just telling your boss at Amazon, like, hey, I got to go over here and do this thing. There's a process to it. So I think for me, this is as much about being good to myself and maybe taking a horizontal step in my career. And I say that also knowing that I've already met people over here, that my network is global. Within a month, I'm meeting someone this afternoon that I just couldn't meet if I were in America. And so where do I hope to land? I hope to the other pillars in my life, you know, the faith and the family, and those two in particular have been a huge part of this. Like just having my faith and the leaders in my world of faith are amazing, that they're do such a good job of instilling that like fearless, it's almost like a competition. Collaboration and competition are two words that really mean a lot to me. And so I want to take this opportunity and live it to its fullest extent, so that when I come back, the energy, the people, the connections, and all that I learn, because that's what this is about. You know, we're meeting in the Latin Quarter. That's pretty, like, this is the reason it's the Latin Quarter, is based on all the schools and all the languages and all the people who came, and kind of starting with the Romans, like they kind of came and occupied the space. So I think this is what the city is to me. It's a big experiment. It's a big adventure, and I'm not going to come back the same guy for whether it's my nonprofit, whether it's the partnership I'm in with kind of some of the investing world and some of the mentorship I'm doing. I want to be better in all aspects, and I think sometimes, to your point, shaking up your life, putting it in the snow globe and letting the flakes fall in different places is incredibly helpful, and allows me to see the world in a more energized and unique way. And I can bring that into my relationships, my family, my marriage, and obviously in my work. But this wasn't one of those steps where I moved over here for a job. It was, I'm moving over here and I have to work twice as hard till 2 a.m. now, because my work world is back on Pacific time.
I want to hit you with one more before I ask some specific questions.
Yeah.
You said something that I can't get out of my mind. You said, I want to be good to myself, right? We are in this community and a culture where being good to yourself means getting a great cup of coffee at this coffee shop, as they continue to make amazing espressos for people. But it also means taking a retreat, right? Or going to the spa, or going to the gym, or a yoga class. There are these bursts, right? You're being good to yourself in your life. And I think sometimes we think that we need to apologize for that.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, I just took a month off to travel throughout Spain and write, and then come here, of course, see you and really dive into my own life. And at times you can feel guilty to do that, because it's not the 3-day weekend, a great Instagram picture, and say, I went to a retreat in New Mexico. You know, cool. Everybody gets passed for that.
Yeah.
But it's like, whoa, Brett, oh my God, like you and Kate came over and it's 6 months or even more. But you did it for yourself, and really that's what you have to answer to.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, have you thought of that? Of like, you know what, I'm doing this. You said it earlier, you're doing it for you and your wife, and you made this commitment, but like, you're doing this for yourself in a magical way from the time you got that passport in the Bahamas to now.
Yeah.
And I think of that of what was that, 20 years ago?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that, 18 years ago?
Yeah, something like
You know, have you thought about like what a gift not only you're giving yourself, but allowing yourself to use the word earlier, to receive?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a process, right? Like there are days, especially at the beginning or before I came over here, where I was like, how am I doing this? Like, I'm a kid from small Amish country, Ohio, grew up in Columbus, Ohio. And, you know, I think my sense of adventure has always allowed me to just move through some of the guilt and negativity. I remember the first time I got to go to Hawaii to play lacrosse. I was a professional lacrosse player. Someone invited me to go to Hawaii. They paid for my ticket. I was playing for their team over there, and I almost had a breakdown. And my mentor at an early age, an incredible guy, Bob Cusick, like grabbed me by the scruff of my neck because I was like afraid to ask for 5 days off of work. And we were doing this really entrepreneurial thing around a new shoe brand that is still running and amazing, and he just said, like, you've got to just stop. Like, you work your butt off, and if someone or some opportunity presents itself and you're not hurting anyone and you're not, and it's something that like fills your cup, then get out of here. Go see the world, do it, because ultimately, you know, here's a guy who made millions and millions on Wall Street and had one small black and white TV in his house. Everything he did was about learning. He started a raspberry forest in his backyard, had pigs as dogs walking through his house, and this is a zillionaire. Like, I would have never thought. And I'll hold on to those moments with him and his teachings for the rest of my life, because the being good to myself sometimes, and maybe it's our like sports background, that like sometimes being the best to ourselves was in the middle of two-a-days when we're just killing ourselves. And so there are times where this is stressful. I don't feel like things are, it's just Paris, so it's legendarily like not as user-friendly as maybe other places you could visit. But I'm committed to proving those people right, is to the Bob Cusicks of the world, my parents, our families, you know, the people like you. There are so many people in my life who just understand this, and maybe they understand it from their own terms, like they feel the sense of adventure like you do, or they understand it because they know me. They know that this is what lights my world. I'm not coming here to eat baguettes and drink coffee, which I certainly, that's part of it. But the bigger thing is I'm here to learn. My sense of adventure and curiosity has got to be dealt with. And my wife is no different. She's an artist, so she needs this creative inspiration. So that the spa and the trip to Vegas and all those things are awesome, but it is a little more decadent, and you have to kind of tease it out. It's all good, and the people who spend a lot of money on yoga, for instance, think that's the best money spent if that's actually filling your cup. I think the money spent on travel, on the money spent on books, the money spent on things that like really light you up and fill your cup, it shouldn't be seen as a decadence. It should be seen as a necessity.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, we're going to get out of here. Give people, because the city's getting going now. It's a little bit before 9 a.m. You could feel the city and the vibe here in the Latin Quarter. You could hear the noise outside. The workers are getting moving here. 3 to 5 thoughts. People who want to go do this. Whether it's practical, what do you got to do, to the how do you deal with the emotional side of it. But there's people listening right now at minute 23. They're like, okay, I'm going here, here. Give them some coaching points. Coach Brett here. Put your coach hat on.
Well, the first thing is wherever you go, spend time understanding the process. Once I did that, no different than prepping for a game or a speech or a presentation to your board. I spent a lot of time on the embassy, found people I knew in France. Just, someone somewhere. Like, and if you don't, someone knows someone. So I connected with the embassy, found the steps that were involved in getting a visa for 12 months. And once I saw the steps, I just over-prepared for every part of it, and it's been a lot easier. Immigration laws are not really meant to keep us out. They're just meant to keep us in line. And so that's not true. We can get into another part of that where it's not always true, especially in the climate of our time right now. But there is, if you want to do this, it can be done is the first thing you need to just like wrap your head around. 2, recognize that the stress, the potential arguments, not to say that Kate and I ever argue, but like maybe one pops up here and there. It's all from the stress and the stress of doing this and packing your life up and moving for however, there's somebody listening to this podcast who's going to relocate to like Provence and live there. So like what we're doing is minuscule to what some of these other people is. If it gets hard or stressful, that's part of the process. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. You just have to move through it. You have to walk through it. And then the last step is to, for me, was to have a reason. And I told you that, like, this is about living a commitment and a promise we made to one another, that we were going to do this. That's more important than anything else in our life right this minute. This is part of our process growing together, really acting on our faith versus just talking about our faith. And we're coming someplace that requires us to grow. This is not Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which I love that place, but this is Paris. They got a way of doing life, and you're a guest, and that's a good place to be every once in a while. So I would say the practical steps are learn the process. We'll find a place, understand that stress is part of it, and the other thing is have a reason why. Simon Sinek, right? Start with why. Know why you want to go, so all the little barriers and insecurities and all that they become energy versus a deterrent.
Yeah. Wow, dude, you're the best. I've worn this T-shirt.
I was just about
that
to say.
I happen to have on today, and I just grabbed it this morning because it was dark. You do as well. It's Another Best Day, which I always think about, Brett, is your company, with you and a partner, and you gave me this travel T-shirt about 12 years ago, and I still wear it the first day I go on a trip. Usually not the last day because it usually hasn't been washed, but this has been washed, so I'm rocking it right before I head to the airport here. But thank you for coming to San Sebastian. Thank you for sharing your new home with me and my girlfriend and our small little family. And it's been an absolute blast, man. Thanks.
I mean, Yogi, like, no cooler way that we land here, and 2 days afterward, my wife and I are meeting you for a cup of coffee. It was, God orchestrate things in crazy ways, and there was no doubt that he had his hand in this. And being able to see you in your element in San Sebastian, Kate and I are driving 8.5 hours home from San Sebastian through Toulouse, and we were sitting there thinking, like, and this is probably what I want to leave, like, always recognize that, are you doing something for a certain amount of time, or just always leave it open? Because as we're driving home, we're like, why does this have to be 6 months, 12 months, whatever? Like, to your point, like, the adventure never has to stop. It's just going to look different at different seasons in your life. So to your listeners, who are probably one of the coolest communities on the, in the podcast world, I would just say, grab a book, read about a place, and just go. Travel is really a cheap thing still, and is really, really accessible. So do it. It is so important to learn what other people are going through. Walk with them, talk with them, and if you're in Paris, look us up.
Doesn't get any better than that. Brett's social handle is?
At Brett Hughes 6 on Instagram. And if you're not going to really see me talking in the mic a whole lot, it's just going to be my travel photography. So some people come and they're like, who is this guy? Like, it's just travel photography if you find me.
I love it. All right. Well, that's Brett Hughes. We'll make sure we connect with you on all your links in the show notes on this. This is another episode of Life Without Limits, international version from the heart of Paris. Brett, thanks for coming on, man.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed the soundtrack, baby.
Yes, the soundtrack is lit, as was this conversation. You know how we end this thing. The only limits that we have in life are the ones we set ourselves. Au revoir.